Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. And friends, welcome back. We are in Calloway County with injury attorney Jeff Roberts. Jeff, how are you today?
I am doing good, Jim. How are you?
Buddy, I'm doing well. I always like it when we go back and do a reference episode, this is going to focus on the various types of insurance. And I guess right about now, people are starting to look at their auto insurance policies for renewal. So this is a good time to kind of give them some information, and hopefully people will listen and share this out because it's confusing. I mean, you're an attorney, you deal with insurance issues all day long, every day. But for me, wow, it's just trying to understand, okay, now what's the difference between this one and that one?
Exactly. You have a lot of folks at this time of the year and throughout the year that are renewing their automobile insurance coverage, and a lot of them are looking at it and may not realize what the different types of coverages are that they have on their policy or that are available for them to have on their policy from that standpoint. And a lot of people think, well, if I just go tell my insurance agent I want full coverage, then I'm covered. And they don't realize full coverage is talking about the different types of insurance that you have on your vehicle. It's not talking about the policy limit. So you may have all kinds of different types of coverage, but very low limits, and so your protection is not really that great of protection there. So it's having the various types of coverage that you need, plus having the appropriate limits of those coverages is what's important.
No, that's outstanding. Why don't we do this for the listeners? Why don't we go ahead and list out the various types of insurance that we're going to talk about, kind of give them a roster of where we're going to go, and then we'll dive in.
Okay. From a car insurance standpoint, when you look at your policy, a lot of times, and I'm going to kind of go through these the way I normally see these on the deck sheet of a policy, so people can follow along.
That's the declarations page, right?
Declarations page, yes. And I apologize using the legal jargon for that. So when you look at it, a lot of times it'll have bodily injury, sometimes called bodily injury liability, both saying the same thing from that standpoint. The other's property damage liability, personal injury protection coverage.
That's PIP coverage or no-fault coverage.
PIP or no-fault, other terms for that. Underinsured motorist coverage, uninsured motorist coverage. Then you have collision, you have comprehensive, and then a few others that don't get covered a lot when attorneys are talking about this, because it is rental car coverage, roadside assistance, and then another one some people need to be thinking about is gap insurance, which we'll talk about later as well.
That makes sense. And for the motorcyclist out there, we're going to focus more on car insurance today, but just remember that's probably a standalone policy, and we've got other episodes that we'll talk about this. And a lot of them, I think, Jeff, you've said in previous episodes that car insurance policies actively exclude motorcycle issues. Right?
A lot of car insurance policies, unless the motorcycle is listed as a covered vehicle on that policy, a lot of the policies in the language of it will say, any vehicle owned, we don't cover motorcycles. Some companies just don't write motorcycle coverage at all. So, some policies will say we don't cover anything to do with motorcycles with those. Others will say any vehicle owned by the named insured not under this policy is also not covered. So if you've got, a classic car, for instance, that may be insured by a different insurance company, well, then your insurance for your daily driver may not cover it because there's two different insurance companies, two different insurance policies in that setting.
That makes sense. All right, so let's jump into this as we go through it. Bodily injury was the first type of policy first type of coverage that you had mentioned in the list.
Yes, bodily injury liability coverage. What that is, a lot of times when people think about insurance, it's to protect themselves from being sued when they're at fault in causing an accident. That's what bodily injury liability is. If you are in an accident that you cause either you're the sole cause of the accident, you run a stop sign and hit somebody, or if there's multiple people that are at fault in causing the accident, which we've discussed before in Kentucky, you can have multiple people that are at fault in causing a collision. So if you are partially at fault or fully at fault, solely at fault in causing the collision, the bodily injury coverage is what's going to provide coverage for anybody that is injured in that accident. To them, that anybody injured by your negligence or your fault in causing the accident will be able to access that bodily injury liability. So if you have passengers in your vehicle, then they would be covered under the bodily injury. If it's the other driver gets injured in the other vehicle, then they would be able to be covered under that. What you see frequently in Kentucky is what's called split limits on that. And to explain that is you'll see on your policy, and it will have, it may have 50 backslash 100. So what that is you have, if it's 50, 100, you have $50,000 for any one individual, but $100,000 total coverage. So if one person's injured, regardless of the severity of their injuries, they could only access $50,000 of your insurance coverage, your bodily injury liability insurance, because that's the policy limits. If more than one person's injured, then the coverage would go up to $100,000. So if two were injured, each could potentially get $50,000 if their damages justified that. If you had 5 people injured, then the 5 are going to split the $100,000. It's not $50,000 per everybody injured. $50,000 for one person, but the coverage will never exceed $100,000, no matter what the.
That's that upper cap.
That's the cap. No matter how many people are injured. Now, I say 50, 100. You could have 25, 50 if you got the lowest. That's the lowest you can ride in Kentucky for that. Some people will have 100, 300. Same situation. One person get 100. 300's max, but you can get up to where you just have a single limit when you get to the higher numbers. I see that at times where the single limit's 250,000. It's 250 per one person or everybody, depending on how many it's injured, or 300,000 sometimes as well. For individual policies, your personal policy. Now, fleet vehicles, semis, and all of that are going to have much higher limits than what we're talking about here.
Exactly. Now, Jeff, when you started describing bodily injury coverage, you mentioned that if you as the driver are at fault, this covers the other people. What about your own injuries if you're at fault? Does bodily injury help you at all?
Not if you're the driver. Like if you are, a husband and wife both covered on the policy, both named insureds on the policy, and the husband's driving and the wife's a passenger, since she's not the one at fault, she is covered under the policy. Then, even though she's a named insured on the policy, she's still covered under that bodily injury, but the driver is not covered. Also, if you loan your vehicle to someone else and they are in a wreck, your insurance liability is going to protect them and protect you from a standpoint of should you have loaned this vehicle out to somebody that from that standpoint. So that the driver of the vehicle cannot access the coverage for bodily injury liability, but whoever the driver is, if they are an authorized driver. So somebody steals your vehicle, different situation, but an authorized user of the vehicle is getting protected as well.
Okay, so if your son says, "Hey, Dad, can I have the keys? I want to run down and do this," and you flip them the keys, they are covered for that.
Assuming they have a driver's license.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Good point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So interesting. So, and the state minimum, as you said, is 25,000.
And actually, they would still be covered without their driver's license.
Yeah.
But you may still have liability in that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
But the state minimum is 25,000. But again, if you've ever been in a hospital, $25,000 doesn't go nearly as far as you think it might. So.
Excuse me. You're correct. 25,000 doesn't go very far now, especially a lot of ER visits. The medical bills are over $10,000, just the ER visit alone, and that's a standard ER visit. Frankly, if you have, if the injuries are severe enough that the person's getting an MRI or CT scan, or if they have a break where they have to bring in a specialist or something of that nature, then you're going up and up from that standpoint. So $25,000 of bodily injury coverage, it's the state minimum. It has not been increased in a long period of time. In fact, I can't remember how long ago it's been since it was raised to 25,000. But it's been. I started practicing in '92, and it's not been increased since then.
Wow.
And the cost of medical has gone up drastically since then. So 25,000 is not adequate coverage, in my opinion. Frankly, I do this for a living, and it's very rare for somebody to come into my office whose injuries don't exceed 25,000. There are some, but it's not that often that occurs, and usually those, it's just that's somebody who has very minor strain, didn't really go to the emergency room, didn't have much treatment, and resolved completely within a relatively short period of time. So you've got, you hit that 25 limit pretty quickly there. So to protect yourself, you need to have better insurance coverage than that. Frankly, I recommend just the normal individual to have 300,000 if you are a professional or a high income earner that's a target over and above what your insurance limits are going to be. I'd suggest you have 250 or 300 and an umbrella policy potentially in that situation.
That makes a lot of sense. Friends, as we get ready to transition, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things that Jeff mentioned. He mentioned passengers in the car. We've done a previous episode talking about the rights of passengers in car accidents, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And also, Jeff had mentioned where maybe multiple people are at fault. Kentucky, as Jeff explains, is a pure comparative fault state, and that means that actually can impact what you recover, even if you're not really 100% at fault for it. But there's a link in the show notes to that episode. You might want to check that out. That's really good information. Jeff, why don't we transition to property damage?
Yeah, property damage is essentially, it's kind of like the bodily injury. It follows the same way. It's called, if you're at fault in causing the accident, then your property damage coverage pays for the property damage of someone else. So if you run a red light and hit somebody's car, the property damage coverage you have is going to pay to repair that person's vehicle. From that standpoint, again, the minimum coverage in Kentucky is 25,000. That is usually not seen as a split coverage like the others, as a general rule. But you can have higher than that. A lot of times you'll see that mirror what the single limit liability is. So if you have 5,000, a lot of times you'll have 50,000 of property damage coverage. And again, it's been raised more recently than the bodily injury liability, but it's been a long time since that's been raised as well. And value of vehicles now, a lot of vehicles on the road are valued at higher than $25,000, and so when you have that type of if you wreck into a vehicle valued more than that, then that can come back against you personally, potentially, in that situation. That's the reason you really want to pay attention to these limits on your coverage. Again, having the comprehensive cover or full coverage talks about the different types of coverage you have. The policy limits talk about how much coverage that you have on those.
That makes sense. It's kind of interesting how you said that, if you have a business or if you're a professional, you might be more of a target. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of times when we go to look at renewing our auto insurance, we just say, yeah, go ahead and just, let's just renew the policy. We don't really think life may have changed. Maybe I've got a new kiddo. Maybe I've remarried or divorced. There's all sorts of different life factors that come into, maybe I've moved from an apartment into a house. So now that's an asset, that could be, again, become part of a lawsuit if something happens. So, yeah, I mean, you really need to take time to sit down and go through your policy each year. Don't just renew it just because, hey, I just want to get it off the plate. These are important decisions, actually.
It is. In fact, it hadn't been that long ago. It was earlier in 2025 when I had a doctor's deposition, and afterwards the doctor and I were talking. I'd taken his deposition before, and we not friends, but we know each other type situation. And he asked me then, he said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." And that's what he said. Well, my getting ready to do my auto insurance, and we wanted to talk about the limits and all of that, and I can't remember. And he said, I hadn't looked at it in a long time, and back when he was in medical school versus now, and I think his limits were like 100, 300, and he said, is that going to be sufficient? And I explained to him then, I said, you're probably better off increasing that and getting an umbrella policy as well to protect you from that standpoint, just because you have a decent amount of money at this point in time, and so you need to make sure you can protect your assets to protect yourself and your family in that situation. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Jeff, let's bring this one up. We've talked about this in a lot of different episodes. PIP insurance, personal injury protection, or as we said, no fault insurance. You call it also BRB, basic.
You see it referred to as BRB or basic reparations benefits. It's referred to as no fault insurance or no fault coverage. It's referred to as PIP or personal injury protection coverage.
It's all the same thing.
All the exact same thing, and that is now we're getting to the coverage that protects you, the driver, and it also applies to the PIP. Also applies to the passengers in your vehicle. But if you are in a wreck, regardless of who is at fault, that's the reason this is referred to as no fault coverage, because it's regardless of who is at fault. Then your insurance, the PIP coverage, will pay the first $10,000 of first $10,000 of medical and or lost wages. There's some other things too, but 95% of the time, it's used for medical and or lost wages. From that, the $10,000 is the minimum they can write. You can purchase what's called added reparations benefits, so basically added PIP coverage, usually in 10,000 degree or increment. So you can get an additional 10, additional 20,000 of that if you wish to do so, and it can be beneficial to do so in that regard. But that's paying out the medical bills that you incur as a result of an injury received in a car wreck. So that's the first time it's protecting you. And unlike the other coverages, everybody in your vehicle has that same amount. So if you've got two people in the vehicle, each have the 10,000. If you've got the 10,000 and that's all, each have 10,000 of that coverage. If you got five people in the vehicle, all five have 10,000 of coverage. It's not split between the number of people. So every person in the vehicle. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's not, that doesn't seem fair that my insurance is having to pay my medical bills when the other driver is the one who was solely at fault in causing this wreck. The no-fault law came into being because there was disputes among the insurance companies as to who was at fault in causing wrecks, and no insurance company was paying because insurance company A was saying that driver B's the one at fault. Driver B's insurance was saying no, driver A's was at fault, and neither one of them was paying either insurance. So Kentucky and other states adopted the no-fault policy of PIP for PIP or BRB or no fault, whatever you want to call it, so that the treatment is covered initially when it is incurred, and then the at-fault driver at some point in the future, when fault is determined, the at-fault driver's insurance would reimburse your insurance what they've had to pay out of the PIP coverage, or at least a good portion of what they had to pay out from that standpoint. So,
but at least if you needed to go to an ER, an urgent care, or your personal doctor, at least you could use that PIP coverage to kind of offset some of those costs, so you didn't have to pay all that out of pocket, which is a nice benefit.
Correct, exactly. And I've talked to a lot of clients who've come in here and said, look, I can't afford to pay medical bills. It's the start of the year like we are right now. It's early in the year, and I haven't met my deductible yet, and I don't have $2,000 to pay for an emergency room visit. And so when I explain to them, you've got this coverage that will cover and help pay, that makes it a lot easier for people to seek medical treatment that should seek medical treatment, because sometimes people make a decision on, it may be in a position where it's, do I pay my car insurance and pay my electric bill, or do I go see a doctor and then I'm $100 less than what I can afford to pay for my car insurance or whatever it is. So, and they don't have to make that decision if they manage everything correctly in regard to and know what the different insurances are for them.
Outstanding. Well, okay, so Jeff, let's get into underinsured motorist coverage, or that's really uninsured. I always get these backwards.
Yeah.
Uninsured is coverage. Sometimes you'll see UM/UIM. That's really
Correct.
what we're getting into. Let's talk about coverage.
Or uninsured motorist coverage is coverage that protects you. Again, this is getting into the insurance that protects you as the driver or passenger in the vehicle. If you're in a wreck and the other driver is uninsured, then your own vehicle will pay your damages, your bodily injury damages that you receive up to whatever limits you have, or to the amount of your damages, depending on which is the higher or the lower of the two. And so it pays for your damages, and then your insurance company has the claim then back against the at-fault driver who was uninsured for what they've had to pay you. So instead of you trying to get the money out of someone who may not have the money, who's uninsured, you get that money from your insurance. Your insurance has charged you for that by the premiums, and then they go to try to collect that back if they want to do so. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it's paying you for your bodily injury if the at-fault driver has no insurance coverage at all. And where I practice at down in western Kentucky, we border Tennessee, and for a long time, I don't know what it is now in Tennessee. I'm seeing more Tennessee drivers in Kentucky that have insurance than I did in the past, so they may have changed that law. But for a long time, Tennessee did not require drivers on the road to have motor vehicle insurance coverage.
Wow.
And so frequently I would have Tennessee drivers get in a wreck here in Kentucky, and there'd be no insurance. If they were at fault, there'd be no insurance coverage because they weren't required to have it. So.
Unbelievable. Let me ask you this. Uninsured motorist coverage, does that also come into play if you're involved in a hit and run and you can't identify that driver? Does come into play there at all?
It can come into play if you can't identify the driver, but there has to be contact.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Most insurance policies require contact. Kentucky law does not require that, but the insurance policy itself does, and Kentucky courts have said that's a valid policy exclusion. So if somebody pulls out in front of you and you swerve and go in a ditch and you can't identify who that person is and there was no contact between the vehicles, then uninsured may not apply. But if they hit you and there's damage to your vehicle and then they run a hit and run, as you mentioned, then yes, the uninsured would kick in at that point in time.
Outstanding. Okay, so let's transition now to the one I got mixed up earlier with. This is UIM coverage. This is underinsured motorist coverage.
Right, underinsured motorist coverage. And a lot of times when you look at your policy, it will list them together. It will say UM /UIM or uninsured / underinsured motorist coverage. They will identify them together on the thing because the limits are usually the same for both of those as well. And if you have one, a lot of times you have the other. Now, underinsured is mandatory coverage in Kentucky. I should say that as well. It's mandatory coverage. It has to be $25,000. You can purchase more, and you should purchase more. Underinsured is optional coverage, so you don't have to. The insurance company does not have to write underinsured motorist coverage for you. But frequently, I see that, and if you don't have it, you want to make sure you get underinsured motorist coverage.
Okay, so is automatic. I mean, you have to have that.
Correct.
UIM is optional, but you strongly recommend it.
I strongly recommend it, and
yeah.
most insurance policies have both. But I do see it at times that it can be. And PIP can be rejected, underinsured motorists can be rejected as well from that standpoint because those are to protect you, so you can reject those. But you don't need to, obviously. And underinsured, you need to make sure you have. Underinsured motorist is for your own protection and the protection of the people in your vehicle for their bodily injuries if you're not at fault in causing the accident. So if you're in a wreck, you weren't at fault, the other driver's insurance bodily injury liability limits are $25,000 and your medical bills are $50,000, Well, you've got the 25 liability coverage, you got your 10,000 PIP, and you got 15,000 more of medical bills out there that's not being covered from either one of those. The underinsured motorist is what kicks in and pays your damages, bodily injury damages, over and above what the at-fault driver's insurance is. So if your damages exceed the at-fault driver's insurance coverage, then you can look to your own insurance for the underinsured motorist coverage at that point, and that will kick in at that time to cover the to pay you for your bodily injury damages up to potentially whatever the limits are on your underinsured motorist coverage. From that standpoint. So.
And again, because the other person was at fault in that scenario, this doesn't affect your rates if you use your UIM coverage, right?
Correct.
PIP would be kind of the same thing because it's not
PIP,
a fault.
PIP, uninsured motorists and underinsured motorists should not affect your insurance rates. There's a regulation on point on that. Now, that doesn't. They can, rates go up. Almost every year you'll see your insurance rates go up, and I've had clients come in and say, I'm insured by Farm Bureau, and you told me my rates weren't going to go up, and now they've gone up $10. And it's like, I have Farm Bureau insurance. I didn't have a claim. Mine went up by $10 too. That's just the rates went up. It had nothing to do with accessing the coverage. So
Okay, that makes sense. So we're going to transition yet again. Let's talk a little bit about collision insurance.
collision, that is the coverage from that standpoint is when you are in a wreck. If you are at fault in the wreck, then if you don't have collision insurance, you don't have insurance to cover your vehicle damage.
Okay.
So collision insurance kicks in. If you're at fault, it pays to repair your vehicle. It pays the property damage to your vehicle if you're in a collision from that. Regardless, if you hit another vehicle or if it's icy outside and you slide on ice, driving too fast for the conditions or something of that nature, and you hit a telephone pole, it's going to pay to repair your own vehicle at that time. It's paying your own property damage even when you are at fault in the accident. You also see collision kick in even when you are not at fault in causing the accident, when there is at least a delay on the other insurance company. If they're investigating the accident, trying to determine who's at fault, then frequently your own insurance will pay the property damage to you for your vehicle to go ahead and get it repaired, get it serviced, or if it's totaled, to give you the value for of the fair market value of your vehicle, so you can go purchase another vehicle. It will do that quicker, and then later on get that money back from the at-fault driver's insurance coverage. Now, the one thing with collision insurance is there's a deductible as a general rule, $500,000, whatever you've got. So if they're paying to repair your vehicle, it's going to pay all but that deductible, and you'll be out that deductible. If you're at fault, then you're just out that deductible. If you're not at fault, when your insurance goes back to the other insurance, the at-fault driver's insurance, to get reimbursed what they paid, they also get your deductible back for you. So once they get reimbursed that, then they'll send you the check for the deductible that they collected from the other insurance as well.
Basically trying to make you whole at that
Correct.
point. Okay, that makes sense. But to be sure, or to be clear, that has to do with property damage, not bodily injury, correct?
Correct, yes. That is property damage only. Collision is covering the property damage.
Okay. So there's another type of insurance called comprehensive. Let's talk a little bit about comprehensive.
Comprehensive is the same situation as collision, just for different reasons. It covers the damage to your vehicle, to your property, your property damage, but it kicks in when the damage is not from fault.
Okay.
Acts of God type situations, hail damage, or storm damage, from that standpoint. So if your car is parked under a tree and lightning strikes that tree and it falls on your vehicle, it will pay to repair that. Or if you hit a deer, if you're driving down the road, a deer runs out in front of you, runs into you, it pays for that. If something causes a fire to your vehicle, electrical issue, and it burns, that's where the comprehensive insurance comes in. It comes to pay to repair your vehicle, or to replace or pay the fair market value of your vehicle if an act of God or something that's not a fault-based system causes the property damage.
Okay. And then when we started the conversation, we mentioned full coverage. And really, when you have full coverage, that's a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about. But again, the issue becomes you may not have the proper limits. You may not have enough insurance, but you're running around thinking, hey, I got full coverage.
Correct. I mean, if you buy we'll talk about the comprehensive and the collision coverage, for instance, right off the bat. So if you've got $25,000 limits on those, and you just went and purchased an $80,000 pickup truck, and you've got 25,000 of collision and comprehensive coverage, you're driving home at night after work, and a deer runs out in front of you and does $40,000 of damage to your vehicle, the collisions coverage is only going to pay 25 of that. And so that's what the limits are. That's all they're going to pay, and that deer doesn't have insurance coverage.
Right.
So that is part of the reason why you need to make sure that you have good coverage. You need the good bodily injury and property damage limits to protect your assets if you're at fault in causing the accident. And nobody ever intends to be at fault in causing the accident. Nobody goes out there and intends to cause a wreck. Nobody wants to injure anybody else from that perspective. But stuff happens. And sometimes, something distracts you, whatever, and you can be the source of the accident. You can be the person at fault in causing the accident. And you protect your assets by having the good bodily injury, the good property damage limits there to protect your interests, but also to protect the people you've injured and to help take care of the people you've injured. It's the PILP, the UM, collision, comprehensive are what is protecting you, where you have that to protect yourself and your vehicle and be able to get your vehicle repaired without it having to come out of your pocket. If the accident is an act of God, or if somebody else causes you bodily injury, then it helps to make sure you are made whole as a result of the injuries that you may receive. So that's the reason you need to pay attention to those policy limits, because full coverage with 25,000 limits, you've got all of these that we've just talked about. You've got every one of those different items of coverage, types of coverage, but it may not be enough to cover your damages, what you've lost as a result of that collision. So that's where the policy limits aspect of it comes into play.
And that makes sense. And this, this seems a little complicated, but I hope the way we're going through it makes it a lot more understandable than what you might have assumed instead of just quickly renewing your policy. This is, again, while we really encourage you all to share this episode with your friends and your colleague and your other family members, just so they get this information, because a lot of us just simply don't think about it. We're all busy, and this is a really good reference episode, so I appreciate it.
Right.
Jeff, let's transition now into some of these more specialized coverages. And one of them that you mentioned was rental car coverage.
Yes, and this is with your car insurance. You can purchase rental car insurance and roadside assistance. I'll talk both of those kind of together. But rental car is if you're involved in a wreck, whether it's your vehicle is damaged, whether you're at fault or not at fault in it, then your vehicle insurance will help to pay a certain dollar per day for rental car coverage, so you'll have a vehicle to drive while your vehicle is being repaired. In that instance, some of these rental car coverages will even kick in if you have a major repair due to engine failure, and you're having to have a transmission replaced, and it's going to take 3 weeks to get a new transmission in and get it put in, and the rental car coverage will even kick in. Some rental car coverage will even kick in to pay in that regard. The roadside assistance is if you have a breakdown on the road, then you can reach out to them. They will make arrangements for someone to come and tow the vehicle, or if it's a flat tire, someone to come out and change your tire for you if you're not able to change it yourself, or if it's just if you go to a store and the car won't crank. Frankly, I don't know what happened with batteries. When I was a kid, it seemed like every battery before it went out, you'd hear it getting sluggish on starting, but then it'd start, okay, it's time to replace the battery. Now it seems like go out and crank it one time and it cranks right up. Next time it won't do anything. So if that's the case, and that happened to me in Paducah a few years ago, luckily I had a family member over there that came and gave me a jump. But if you have this roadside assistance, then you can reach out to your insurance, and they will take care of that. In fact, my daughter took care of it when she got to work and found out she had a flat tire a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, and we have roadside assistance on on her coverage, which is on my policy still, and they sent someone out, took the flat tire off, put her spare tire on, put the flat tire in the back of it so she could go get it repaired or replaced, whatever had to be done in that situation. That's where that roadside assistance comes in. And a lot of times the rental and the roadside assistance aren't that high of coverage from that standpoint. And it can be of great assistance, especially if you travel a lot and you're in an area you're not, that you're not familiar with. It can kick in and be coverage that can be very helpful to you at times from that standpoint.
Well, I can just imagine if you've got some young kiddos and you're ferrying them back and forth all the time. I mean, it'd be nice to have this, especially if I'm out taking a road trip somewhere and the car breaks down. That'd be some really nice peace of mind for you.
Yes.
Okay. And Jeff, this would confuse me when you first brought it up, but I'm looking forward to the explanation once again so I can start to remember this stuff. You talked about something called gap insurance.
Yeah, gap insurance is usually not going to be written by the insurance company for your vehicle. It's separate. Gap insurance is coverage that will, it's to cover the difference between the property damage you've had and the value of your vehicle or the value of your loan, how much you owe on it. So frequently, especially when someone first purchases a vehicle, frequently you can be what's called underwater on that vehicle, which means that the fair market value of that vehicle, 6 months, a year after you bought the vehicle, fair market value may have dropped more than your loan has dropped. So if you owe $30,000 on the vehicle, you're involved in a collision, and they come in and they look at it and say, well, the fair market value of this vehicle is $26,000, not $30,000. Well, the insurance company's only going to pay you $26,000 if they have that limits. They're only going to pay you $26,000 for the vehicle, so that other $4,000 is out of your pocket to pay that note off because you still owe that loan.
Yeah.
It doesn't just go away.
Yeah.
So the gap insurance, and a lot of times you get it when you get the loan, is when you're going to look at the gap insurance as a general rule. Is the gap insurance is there to cover that difference, and so if they pay you 26, then the gap insurance pays that other 4,000, so the vehicle is completely paid off at that point, and you don't have to pay that extra money out of pocket. Now you don't have any left over to go purchase a new vehicle in that situation, but you're not out $4,000 that you're having to pay plus trying to find a new vehicle.
Yeah, even further in the hole there.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's something that. A lot of times it's a one-time. If it's a one-time deal, that's one thing. If it's something you're paying periodically, then you need to kind of keep up with the value of the vehicle versus the how much is the payoff value is on the loan, because there's no sense if the payoff value on the loan is $5,000, the value of the vehicle is $15,000. There's no sense in having the gap coverage anymore because the property damage is going to pay off. Is going to pay off the full value of the loan plus whatever additional is amount over there. So in that situation, whoever's at fault insurance is going to pay $5,000 to the loan company to take care of the loan, and the other $10,000 to you. The rest of the fair market value of that vehicle to you for the value of your vehicle.
Well, I know you mentioned that when you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, it begins to decrease in value. This could also come in handy if you've got a used car. You're still going to potentially have a loan on that used car. So this gap insurance, again, might be a good idea, especially if you get into an accident, and at least you're not further down the hole, trying to replace your vehicle.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Jeff, that pretty much wraps it up for the majority of it. I do want to come back and let you address, if you would, the motorcycle insurance. And again, it's not specifically covered on most of these policies, but we do each spring do a public service episode on getting your bike ready, and we always remind people it's a good time to go look at your coverage.
Exactly, yeah. It's not necessarily covered. You need to make sure you've got coverage for that motorcycle. And if you've got great uninsured on your car and think, well, I don't need it on my motorcycle, it may not apply. if you're injured in your motorcycle. So you need to be careful in that regard. One other thing in regard to motorcycle insurance, I said earlier that the PIP, no fault, BRB, whatever you want to call it, is mandatory of $10,000. On the motorcycle, that's not accurate. On a motorcycle, that's optional coverage. You have to purchase that coverage. It's not required coverage like it is for an automobile or a truck. And so when you get the motorcycle insurance, you need to make sure that they're giving you that PIP coverage on that motorcycle as well.
Absolutely. Jeff, any closing thoughts as we go in? Like, once again, people are starting to look at insurance renewals for their cars and their other vehicles. Again, any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, make sure you got all the different types of coverage that you need for your vehicle and for your family from that standpoint, but also make sure that you have the policy limits that's going to protect you from that standpoint. And while I hope that none of the listeners are ever involved in a motor vehicle collision, if you are involved in a motor vehicle collision, and you have any questions, you suffered an injury, a family member suffered an injury from a collision, and you have questions over not only the access to coverage, but also how to maximize everything and to make sure that you are getting what you're entitled to receive, give me a call here at our office. That's what we do. Day in, day out, we deal with motorcycle accidents, car wrecks, big truck accidents. We have a motto, as you've heard me say multiple times, in that regard, that we provide small town service and deliver big city results. If you go to our website and look at our reviews online on Google and others, I think you'll see that our past clients kind of talk about the service we provide. If you have questions, call us up. We will be happy to try to sit down with you if we can and talk with you about your situation, about your injuries, and what is the best way for you to proceed.
Outstanding. And, we're recording this in your Murray office, but you also have an office in Christian County up in Hopkinsville.
I do. I have an office in Murray, and I have an office in Christian County in that regard, but I only have one phone number. So if you want to reach me, you can call 270-753-0053. That's the phone number for my office, and you will, if you're called during business hours, you're going to get a live person 99% of the time in that regard. But I don't just handle cases in those two counties. I don't handle them just in Murray and Calloway. I handle car accident cases and motor vehicle accident cases all across Kentucky in that regard. I'm licensed to practice in every court in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, every county, county circuit there is, every circuit court, and all the appellate, state appellate and courts. I'm able to handle cases in every county in this state.
And you've actually got a pretty good record up at the Kentucky Supreme Court. There are some podcast episodes we've had on that. So, good to know you got a guy with some firepower.
And actually working on a new brief to the Supreme Court now that's due in about 2 weeks. So,
buddy, good luck with that one.
Yes.
All right, Jeff, once again, thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate the information and the time you took to prep for all of this. There's just a lot of detail there, and I love the way that you break it down and make it just, for the most part, pretty understandable. And if people have questions, I'm sure they'll give you a call.
Yes, I'll be happy to talk to them.
All right, buddy, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.